At Richmond's Level 1 Trauma Center, nurse Tessa Brand has spent 3 years being invisible by choice. Head down, voice low, hands always moving. The hospital's CEO, Daniel Holt, had already tried to remove Captain Kyle Mercer and his military working dog twice, citing liability concerns. The third time, he sent Tessa to deliver the order personally, because she was the newest nurse, the most replaceable one. Captain Mercer, both legs immobilized by mortar shrapnel, looked up at her and asked only one thing. "Can you help me?" Tessa was about to answer when the dog stopped, went rigid, and started alerting in a way she recognized instantly, not because she trained dogs, but because she had heard that exact alert hundreds of times in the markets of Kandahar, in the corridors of Baghdad, in field hospitals where she arrived first, with the right hands and the right tools, before anything could detonate. Someone had planted a device inside the hospital, and there was only one person in that hallway who knew how to stop it. What happens next leaves everyone, absolutely everyone inside that hospital, in absolute shock. If this story hit something inside you, drop a like right now. You have no idea what's coming. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. I want to know who's out there with me. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and welcome to Secrets of Silent Badges, where the quiet ones carry the heaviest stories. Now stay with me. This one will change the way you see the person standing right next to you. The order came at 7:14 in the morning. Not from a supervisor, not from the charge nurse. From Daniel Holt himself, CEO, 14th floor, a man who had never once set foot on the trauma floor during an active call. His assistant delivered it on a folded sheet of hospital letterhead. Tessa Brand read it once, then again. Then she folded it and slid it into the pocket of her scrubs. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. The fluorescent lights buzzed the way they always buzzed. Low, constant, slightly wrong. 3 years on this floor and she still noticed it. Probably always would. She picked up her clipboard and walked toward room 14. The dog was the first thing she saw. He was large, shepherd mix, close to 75 pounds, black saddle pattern, and ears that rotated like radar dishes. He sat beside the hospital bed with the stillness of something trained beyond ordinary patience. His vest was olive drab. The patch on his left shoulder read, MWD, Military Working Dog. His name, according to the tag on his collar, was Rex. Tessa did not look at the dog first. She looked at the man in the bed. Captain Kyle Mercer was 39 years old, according to his chart. SEAL Team 8. Both legs wrapped from ankle to mid-thigh. Left femur fractured in 3 places. Right knee reconstructed with hardware that would set off metal detectors for the rest of his life. He had been transferred from Bethesda 4 days ago for a specialized orthopedic follow-up. He was awake. He was watching her before she cleared the doorway. That was the first thing she noticed. The way he tracked movement. The way his eyes catalogued her hands, her badge, her shoes, before settling on her face with the specific quality of attention that belonged to people who had spent years in places where reading a stranger wrong could end everything. She had that same quality. She had spent 3 years making sure no one noticed it. "Good morning, Captain," she said. Morning. His voice was even, measured. The voice of a man who had learned to spend nothing on words that did not need spending. Rex did not move, did not react to her entry. That meant she had passed some threshold the dog had already established in the first second. She did not acknowledge that she noticed. She checked the IV line, checked the drainage on his left dressing, made a note on the chart. "You are Nurse Brand," he said. Not a question. "That is right. You are the one Holt sent." She did not answer immediately. She finished her notation. Then she looked at him directly. "I have a message from the administrative office," she said. "I know what the message is." He did not look away. "They want Rex out. The request cites hospital liability policy regarding animals in non-designated care areas. He is not an animal. Quiet. Flat. The kind of flat that was not anger yet, but was the ground beneath it. He has more operational hours in hostile environments than half the surgeons on this floor have medical hours total. Tessa said nothing. Rex turned his head and looked at her. She had been looked at by military working dogs before. In Kandahar, in Mosul, in the tight corridors of a field staging area outside Fallujah where the EOD team had been working a secondary device, and the K-9 unit had swept the perimeter twice before she was cleared to approach the primary casualty. She knew exactly what it looked like when a trained dog assessed a human being. Rex was assessing her. She kept her face neutral. "I am not here to argue policy," she said. "I was asked to relay the request. And if I refuse, then I relay your refusal." Something shifted in Mercer's expression, not softening, more like recalibration. He had expected either compliance or conflict. She had given him neither. "How long have you been on this floor?" he asked. 3 years. Before that? She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds. "Before that is not relevant to your discharge summary, Captain." He almost smiled. It did not reach his eyes. But it was there. The edge of something that recognized a deflection when it heard one, because it was the same deflection he used himself. "Fair enough," he said. She made her last notation and moved toward the door. "Nurse Brand." She stopped without turning. "The dog stays," Mercer said. "Whatever Holt decides to do about that is between him and my JAG officer." She walked out. The first time Tessa Brand had seen an IED, she was 22 years old and standing in 6 inches of brown water in a drainage culvert outside Ramadi. She had not been there as a nurse. She had been there as a specialist. United States Army, 71st Ordnance Group, EOD Team 7. Her second deployment. Her first solo render safe on an EFP, an explosively formed penetrator, the kind of device that did not announce itself with wires or timers, but with shaped copper and physics, and the specific silence that preceded everything. Her team leader had been 40 feet back. Standard protocol. You did not crowd an EOD technician during render safe. She had crouched in that water for 11 minutes and 23 seconds. She knew the exact time because she had counted. Counting kept the hands steady. Counting gave the brain something to hold besides fear. When she stood up, the device was inert. She walked back to her team leader and said, "Clear." He had looked at her for a moment. Then, "Good work, Brand." No ceremony, no celebration. Just 2 words, and the next mission on the board. She had loved that work the way that only people made specifically for something can love it, completely, without distance, without the ability to explain it to anyone who had not stood in that water themselves. 7 years. 31 deployable missions. 14 confirmed render safes on devices that would have leveled structures and bodies. Then she had stopped. Not by choice. But that was a different hallway. A different version of herself she had carefully dismantled and stored somewhere she did not revisit. Daniel Holt was waiting in the nurse's station. 53 years old. Tailored suit on a trauma floor. That single detail told Tessa everything she needed to know about a man who believed the difference between a hospital and a corporation was purely a matter of accounting. He looked at her the way men like him always looked at nurses, as instruments, useful until they were not. Interchangeable, replaceable on a Tuesday morning without paperwork. "Well," he said. He declined. He mentioned his JAG officer. Holt's expression did not change, but something behind it compressed. The dog is a liability. One visitor gets startled, one family member files a complaint, and we are looking at a legal exposure that no military sympathy will cover in court. "The dog has never had an incident on this floor," Tessa said. Holt looked at her. She had said it without inflection, without challenge, simply as a documented fact. "I am not asking for your assessment of the dog's behavioral record, Nurse Brand." His voice dropped half a register. "I am asking you to go back in that room and make clear to Captain Mercer that this is not a negotiation. That dog leaves today. And if Mercer does not cooperate, I will have him transferred back to Bethesda by end of shift. Are we clear? Tessa held his gaze. 3 years of this floor. 3 years of holding her tongue in exactly this kind of moment, with exactly this kind of man. Men who had never been in a room where the wrong word meant a body count. Men who used terms like legal exposure in corridors where people were still bleeding from the morning before. I will relay the message, she said. She turned and walked back toward room 14. Behind her she heard Holt say something to the charge nurse. Low, dismissive. Something about attitude and the next performance review. She did not catch all of it. She did not need to. She had been dismissed in more dangerous places than a 14th floor administrator's hallway. She was 12 feet from room 14 when Rex started barking. Not the bark of a dog startled by movement. Not the bark of an animal responding to sound or a stranger in the hall. She had heard that bark before. Her body stopped before her mind caught up, the way it always did when the training ran deeper than the civilian layer she had spent 3 years pressing over it. Her pulse did not spike. Her hands did not move. Her eyes went to the corridor, to the ceiling panels, to the floor seams, to the walls, then to the ventilation access panel near the nurse's station. 12 feet back. Standard hospital HVAC access point. Phillips head screws, 6 of them. 2 were misaligned. Not the misalignment of age or poor installation. The misalignment of a screw that had been removed and replaced in a hurry, in the dark, by someone who did not know that a trained eye would notice. Tessa Brand's mouth went dry. Rex was still barking. Inside room 14 she heard Mercer's voice. Sharp, a single command syllable. Rex went silent immediately, but he did not sit. He stood rigid, body oriented like a compass needle, pointed directly at that wall. Tessa did not run. Running created panic. Panic created secondary casualties. She had learned that at 22 years old in brown water outside Ramadi, and she had never unlearned it. She walked to the nurse's station. She picked up the desk phone. She did not call security. She did not call administration. She dialed a number that existed in no hospital directory. One she had not used in 3 years. One she had promised herself on the day she arrived in Richmond that she would never need again. It rang twice. A voice answered. She said 4 words. I have a device. The voice on the other end did not ask her name. It asked 3 questions. Location, confidence level, civilian exposure. She answered in order. Richmond General Trauma Center, Level 1, 94%, 47 staff, 11 patients currently ambulatory, 1 ICU pod, with 3 critical, 2 pediatric rooms on the east corridor. A pause. Then, hold position. Do not engage. Assets are 12 minutes out. The line went dead. Tessa set the receiver down the way she set down everything. Quietly, deliberately, without any motion that would draw a second glance from the nurse's station tech 3 feet to her left, who was charting without looking up. 12 minutes. She had worked a secondary device in Mosul with a 2-minute margin before a suspected triggerman re-established line of sight. 12 minutes was generous. 12 minutes was also enough time for everyone on this floor to die if she did nothing but hold position and wait. She walked back toward room 14. Rex was still standing, still rigid. His attention had not moved from the ventilation panel. That was information. A trained MWD does not false alert, not one with his operational patch, not one that had been through whatever Mercer had taken him through in whatever theaters that file was classified to describe. She pushed open the door. Mercer read her face in under a second. Talk to me, he said. She closed the door behind her. She did not raise her voice. She stood at the foot of his bed, and she looked at him with the same directness he had used on her that morning, and she said, Your dog is alerting on the ventilation access panel at the nurse's station, north wall, 12 feet down the hall. I have made a call. Response is 11 minutes out now. Mercer did not blink. What kind of device? I do not know yet. I have not approached. Render safe experience? She held his gaze. There it was. The question underneath the question. The one that a SEAL captain asked only when he already suspected the answer was not what a civilian nurse would give. Some, she said. He looked at her the way he had looked at her that morning, that specific, cataloguing stillness. And this time, whatever he was calculating landed somewhere different. "What is your actual name?" he asked. "Tessa Brand." "What was your MOS?" She said nothing. "Because Rex does not alert for civilians," Mercer said. "He assessed you when you walked in this morning. He cleared you, not as a nurse. He cleared you as a known category." The room was quiet. Down the hall, the fluorescent lights buzzed their low, wrong buzz. "I need to know what we are dealing with," she said. "The floor needs to be evacuated, but we cannot trigger a panic evacuation with an unidentified device. If someone pulls a fire alarm before I understand what that panel contains, we could have a secondary event in a stairwell." Mercer absorbed that in one breath. "You know what secondary events look like," he said. It was not a question. "I know what they look like," she said. Another pause. Mercer reached beside the bed rail and pulled Rex to him by the vest handle. The dog came without resistance, repositioning at his side. Mercer's jaw was tight. His legs were immobilized. His upper body was intact, wide shoulders, the particular density of a man who had never fully stopped training, even when ordered to rest. She watched him calculate what she already knew. He could not move without a wheelchair, and a wheelchair on a trauma floor in the next 11 minutes was not an asset. "Who did you call?" he asked. "The right people." "Army? Navy?" "The right people," she said again. He almost smiled, the same almost as before, the same recognition. "What do you need from me?" he said. "Rex," she said. "I need to walk him past the panel, slow, controlled. I need to confirm the alert location precisely before anyone approaches for visual inspection." Mercer looked at her. "He does not work with civilians," he said. "I know. He has a secondary handler protocol. If I give him a command, he will follow a cleared individual for a limited tasking." He paused. "But I need a real answer first." The hallway beyond the door was ordinary. A cart rolling, a phone ringing twice and stopping. The faint sound of a television from the family waiting room at the end of the east corridor. A morning news program, volume low, someone's terrible ordinary Tuesday morning unfolding around a device none of them knew was there. Tessa looked at Mercer. Then she said, 71st Ordnance Group, EOD Team 7, 3 tours. I left 4 years ago. The room held that information. Rex looked at her. Mercer looked at her. Outside, the cart rolled past the door and kept going. "Specialist?" Mercer asked. "Staff sergeant when I separated." He nodded once, slowly. The nod of a man recalibrating an entire morning's worth of assessment in a single motion. "Rex," he said. His voice shifted. Not louder, not a performance. Just a very specific frequency of command that the dog responded to the way a radio responds to the correct signal. "Assist." Rex looked at Tessa. Then he walked to her and sat at her left side. She did not look down at him. She kept her eyes on Mercer. 9 minutes, she said. "Go," he said. She walked the hall the way she had walked 100 approach paths before this one, heel to toe, weight distributed, motion continuous and calm, nothing in her body announcing what her mind was doing. Rex moved with her, perfectly matched. Left side, 6 inches from her leg. His nose working without pause, that low, constant sampling that was invisible to anyone who did not know what to look for, but was in fact the most sophisticated detection instrument on the floor. The tech at the nurse's station looked up as she passed. "Everything okay?" "Just walking him for the captain," Tessa said. "He gets restless." The tech looked at Rex. Rex looked at the tech with the specific benign blankness of a dog who had been trained to present as non-threatening to non-targets. The tech went back to charting. Tessa walked past the station, past the medication cart, past the supply closet door. She stopped 4 feet from the ventilation panel. Rex stopped with her. His body did not change. His posture did not change. But his nose pointed forward, and his ears went flat, and the alert deepened in a way she felt more than saw. A vibration of trained certainty that said, "Here. Here. It is here." She crouched slowly, brought herself to panel level. 6 Phillips head screws. The 2 misaligned ones were in the lower right corner. She did not touch them. She leaned in close enough to smell, and there it was, beneath the antiseptic and the recycled hospital air, something faintly chemical, something that did not belong. Her mind classified it without drama. Specific compound adhesive. Used to secure initiator components, not military surplus ordnance. Something assembled, built by someone who knew enough, but not enough to account for a dog with Rex's specific certification. Built to be found late, or not at all. She straightened. She looked down the corridor, one orderly at the far end. A family member coming out of a room 30 feet east. A nurse emerging from the stairwell with a coffee cup. Normal floor, normal Tuesday. 47 people going about the architecture of their ordinary morning inside a building that was currently something else entirely. She pulled out her pager, the hospital issue one, not the phone she used to make the call, and typed a message to the charge nurse. Brief, procedural sounding. She had crafted the language in her head on the walk from room 14 because in EOD you planned your communication before you needed it, not during. HVS maintenance flagged for inspection. Request quiet floor protocol. No new admissions to North Corridor pending clearance. Routine. She sent it. Then she turned around and walked back toward room 14 at the same pace she had left it. Rex stayed at her left side. She did not run. She did not look back at the panel. She had 7 minutes. What she did not see was the figure at the end of the east corridor. Maintenance uniform. Badge clipped to the breast pocket. The badge was real, issued by the hospital current quarter. But the hands inside the gloves were wrong, too still. The kind of stillness that was not boredom or fatigue, but the specific patience of someone waiting for a phone call that would tell them something had been found, or not found, and what to do next. The figure watched Tessa walk back into room 14, watched the door close, did not move. Then quietly took out a phone, typed a single message. Dog alerted. EOD on floor. Abort or accelerate. The response came in 40 seconds. Accelerate. The figure pocketed the phone and began walking toward the nurse's station. She had 6 minutes when she walked back into room 14. She had 5 minutes and 40 seconds when she understood they were not going to be enough. Mercer read it on her face before she spoke. Talk, he said. EFP adhesive. Initiator compound. Assembled device, not surplus. Someone who knew enough but not perfectly. She moved to the window. Ground floor sightlines. Service entrance. Loading dock. There is a second individual on the floor. East corridor. Maintenance uniform. The badge is real, but the hands are wrong. Mercer's entire body changed. Not visibly. Not in any way the average person in that room would have catalogued. But she saw it. The shift that happened in trained people when the situation reclassified from possible to confirmed. The subtraction of doubt. The arrival of clarity. Inside job, he said. Access to a real badge means inside coordination. Either someone on staff, or someone who got close enough to someone on staff. The device was planted when? Panel screws show recent removal, last 12 hours, probably during the overnight shift change when North Corridor traffic drops. Mercer reached for the bed rail. Do not, she said. He stopped. Your legs are not an asset right now, and I need you to hear that clearly. She turned from the window. What I need from you is your radio. Whatever you came in with. Whatever they let you keep. He looked at her for 1 second. Then he reached under the mattress and produced a compact satellite communicator. Military issue. The kind that did not appear on any civilian hospital inventory sheet. She almost said something about that. She did not. She took it, keyed the frequency she still knew by memory. A frequency she had not used in 4 years. One that lived in the part of her brain that did not erase things regardless of how hard she pressed, and transmitted. EOD-7 Alpha to assets inbound. Second individual confirmed on floor. East corridor. Maintenance cover. Device is live. Initiator present. Trigger method unknown. Request updated ETA and confirmation of perimeter. Static. Then a voice she did not recognize but whose cadence she knew completely. The cadence of someone running toward something while speaking calmly about it. EOD-7 Alpha. Assets are 8 minutes. Perimeter is soft. Repeat soft. Local PD has not been fully briefed. You are the primary on floor until we arrive. Authorization to act. She keyed off. Mercer was watching her. 8 minutes, she said. The second individual moves before that, he said. It was not a question. If they got the abort or accelerate message, yes. How do you know they got it? Because I would have sent it. The room held that for a moment. Rex had repositioned himself against the door, body low. Alert shifted from passive to something else. The specific anticipatory tension of an animal that had read a room correctly and was waiting for the humans to catch up. What is the trigger method risk? Mercer asked. Remote detonation is most likely given the access panel location and the compound used. That means someone needs line of sight or cell signal to the initiator. She looked at the ceiling, at the walls, at the ventilation path from the panel. If it is cell-triggered, we have a problem because this is a hospital. Phones everywhere. Jamming is not an option without cutting monitors. Manual trigger? If the second individual is the trigger man, then him reaching the panel physically is the detonation event. He does not need a phone. He just needs 30 seconds at that wall. Mercer looked at the door. She looked at the door. Rex looked at the door. I have to go back out there, she said. I know, he said. She moved toward the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. If this goes wrong, she said, Rex needs to go with the assets when they arrive. His handler documentation is in the side pocket of his vest. Make sure they process him through the right channel, or he ends up in a civilian shelter. Mercer stared at her. Nothing is going to go wrong, he said. That is what my team leader said in Mosul, she said. He was right that time. I am hoping the pattern holds. She opened the door and walked. The maintenance figure was 20 feet from the nurse's station, moving slowly, unhurried. The walk of someone who belonged or had practiced belonging well enough to pass a 3-second glance. Tessa clocked him from the doorway of room 14 and ran the geometry in her head without moving. 20 feet to the station, 12 feet from the station to the panel, 32 feet total. At current pace, 4 minutes. Maybe less if he accelerated once he cleared the station sightline. She had 8 minutes for assets. He had 4 minutes to the panel. The math was simple, and it was wrong. She started walking. Not toward him. Parallel. Angling across the corridor toward the medication cart outside room 11, moving the way she always moved on this floor. Purposeful, routine, a nurse going from one task to the next, with the quiet efficiency that had made her invisible here for 3 years. She reached the cart, opened the top drawer. Her hands did not shake. They had not shaken in the field either, even the first time, even in the drainage culvert at 22 years old, with 6 inches of brown water, and the specific silence of a device that could end everything. She had understood then that fear and physical function were not the same system. Fear was the noise, the hands were the instrument. You could let the noise run and still play the instrument correctly if you had trained the separation long enough. 7 years of training. She withdrew a trauma tourniquet from the cart drawer. Standard stock. Every cart on this floor carried them. She slid it into her left scrub pocket with a motion that looked like routine restocking. She closed the cart. She looked up. The maintenance figure had stopped. He was looking at her, not the glance of a stranger on a busy floor. The look of someone who was doing the same calculation she was doing, reading her movement pattern, her position, her distance to the panel, and arriving at the same conclusion from the opposite direction. He knew she knew. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second. Then she walked directly toward him. He moved first, not toward the panel, toward her. That was information. That was the tell of someone whose primary objective had shifted from device to witness, the specific threat management decision of an operative who understood that a compromised device was recoverable, but a compromised identity was not. She had 3 seconds before he closed the distance. She used them. The IV pole outside room 12 was stainless steel, 6 feet tall, weighted base. She did not grab it as a weapon. She pulled it directly into his path as she stepped left. Not a swing, not an attack, just geometry. He hit it mid-stride. Not hard enough to go down, hard enough to break his momentum. She used that half-second. She got inside his reach the way EOD personnel learned to get inside the danger radius of a device, not by retreating, but by closing distance beyond the lethal point, where the physics changed in your favor. Her left hand went to his right wrist. Her right elbow went to the specific nerve cluster below his shoulder. She did not use force beyond what the technique required. Excessive force in a confined space with innocent people in adjacent rooms was its own liability. He went down on one knee. He was not untrained. She felt that immediately. He recovered faster than a civilian. Tried to rotate out of the wrist lock with a technique that had been properly taught to him at some point by someone who knew what they were doing. She adjusted, shifted her weight, changed the angle of the lock from rotational to compressive, applied pressure to the joint in a direction it was not designed to travel. He stopped moving. His face was against the corridor floor. His right arm was at an angle that communicated very clearly. Any further motion would produce a consequence neither of them could undo. The nurse's station tech was on her feet. A family member in the hall had frozen completely, paper coffee cup halfway to her mouth, face blank with the specific incomprehension of someone whose brain had not yet caught up to what their eyes were showing them. An orderly at the far end of the corridor had stopped his cart and was reaching for something. His radio, she hoped. Tessa kept her weight exactly where it was. She looked up at the tech. "Call a code gray," she said. Her voice was the same voice she used to report vitals. Even, clear, built for transmission under conditions that degraded everything else. "Active security threat, North Corridor. Do it now. Do not pull the fire alarm. Do not open the stairwell doors. Code gray only." The tech reached for the phone without a word. Tessa looked back down at the figure on the floor. He had stopped resisting. He was breathing. "The device is not going to help you," she said quietly. "And neither is whoever sent you the accelerate message. They are not coming." He said nothing. "The people who are coming," she said. "You do not want to be mobile when they get here. Trust me on that." Down the hall, the PA system clicked on. The charge nurse's voice came through. Controlled, professional, the specific neutral tone of hospital emergency language designed to communicate urgency without triggering civilian panic. "Code Gray, North Corridor. Code Gray, North Corridor. All non-essential personnel, please clear the area. This is not a drill." Tessa held her position. 43 seconds later, the stairwell door at the end of the corridor opened. Not with noise, not with the crash of a door thrown open by urgency. Quietly. The way people who had done this many times before opened doors in active situations. 4 individuals. Dark clothing, no insignia visible. Equipment she recognized by silhouette and carry method. The lead looked at her, at the figure on the floor, at her grip on his wrist. He said one word. Brand. She had not heard her name said that way in 4 years, not as a name, as a designation, as a confirmed coordinate. She looked up at him. "Device is in the ventilation panel," she said. 12 feet north wall nurses station. Initiator present. Trigger method unconfirmed. Remote detonation most likely. No secondary device confirmed, but sweep the floor before you assume. He was already moving before she finished. 2 of his team peeled toward the panel. The third, positioned between the figure on the floor and the rest of the corridor. The lead crouched beside her. "How long have you been on this floor?" he asked. 3 years, she said. He looked at her for a moment, with something that was not quite surprise and not quite admiration, but lived in the territory between them. "You could have called earlier," he said. "I did not have a reason to," she said, "until today." He nodded once. Then he stood and moved toward the panel. She released the figure's wrist. She stood up. Her scrubs were exactly as they had been at the start of her shift. Her ID badge hung straight. Her hands were at her sides. The family member in the hall was still holding the paper cup. Tessa looked at her. "You should go to the family waiting room," she said gently. "East corridor, end of the hall. Someone will come update you shortly." The woman nodded, moved. Tessa turned back toward room 14. Through the small rectangular window in the door, she could see Mercer. He was sitting exactly where she had left him, but his eyes were on her. Rex was standing at the window, tail moving, just barely, the first time all morning. The device was rendered safe at 8:02 in the morning. Tessa knew the exact time because she was watching the clock above the nurse's station when the lead operative keyed his radio and said the two words that still landed in her chest, the same way they always had. The same physical release, the same unwinding of something that had been held at maximum tension since the moment Rex first alerted. All clear. She exhaled through her nose, slowly, controlled, the way she had been taught to exhale after a render safe. Not with relief, but with discipline, because relief was a physiological event that could compromise your assessment of the scene. And the scene was never fully clear until every room had been swept, and every individual accounted for, and every exit confirmed. The lead operative was standing beside her 30 seconds later. His name, she now knew from the credential he had shown the charge nurse, was Special Agent Donovan Reyes, Defense Intelligence Agency. Which meant the call she had made that morning had gone further up the chain than she had expected and had pulled assets from a tier she had not anticipated. That was information. She filed it. "Floor is clear," Reyes said. "Device was a pressure plate secondary trigger. Cell detonation was the primary. But whoever assembled it added a mechanical fail-safe. If someone had opened that panel without knowing what they were looking at, it would have activated regardless of phone signal." Tessa absorbed that. "Blast radius," she said, "contained to the north corridor, but the initiator compound used was military-grade TATP derivative. Contained does not mean survivable for anyone within 40 feet. She looked down the corridor. 40 feet covered room 14. She did not say anything about that. "The individual in custody," she said. "Do you have an ID?" Reyes looked at her with the particular expression of someone deciding how much to give. "We have a partial," he said. "Enough to establish that this was not random. This floor was targeted specifically." A pause. Captain Mercer was the objective. She had already suspected that. A SEAL captain with 11 confirmed deployments, 3 of which were in theaters that did not appear on any public record. Transferred to a civilian trauma center for orthopedic follow-up. A man whose location had been logged in a hospital system that was, by design, more accessible than a military medical record. Someone had found him. And someone had decided that a ventilation panel in a north corridor of a level 1 trauma center was a cleaner solution than whatever the alternative was. "How did they get the badge?" she asked. "Night maintenance contractor, third-party vendor. Staff member was approached 2 weeks ago. Financial coercion." Reyes paused. "He did not know what the badge would be used for. He thought it was an access to record situation. Corporate espionage. He is cooperating." "And the device builder?" "That is a longer conversation." Reyes looked at her steadily. "Which brings me to the part of this morning that I need to talk to you about, Staff Sergeant Brand." The title landed in the corridor between them like something physical. She had not been called that in 4 years. She held his gaze. "I go by Tessa," she said. "I know what you go by," Reyes said. "I also know what you were. And I know that the call you made this morning came in on a frequency that was officially decommissioned 14 months ago." He tilted his head. "Which means you have been maintaining a communication protocol for an operation that was classified, closed, and sealed." She said nothing. "That is not a criticism," he said. "That frequency being maintained is the reason we had assets 12 minutes from this building. If you had called 911, we would have had a bomb squad in 40 minutes, and a very different outcome." He paused. "I just need to understand why you still had it." Tessa looked down the corridor, at the panel, at the marks on the floor where the individual had gone down, at the IV pole still slightly out of alignment from where she had pulled it. "Old habits," she said. Reyes studied her. "Staff Sergeant Brand, why is a DIA special agent the primary respondent on a hospital IED call?" she said. He stopped. She looked at him directly. "EOD calls pull ATF and FBI as primary. DIA is intelligence. DIA does not run render-safe operations on domestic soil unless the device is connected to an active intelligence operation." She kept her voice even, quiet. "Which means this was not a reactive response. You already knew there was a threat against this floor. Against Mercer specifically. You were already positioned." Reyes was quiet for 4 full seconds. "You were always this fast," he said. She felt something move through her that was not quite cold and not quite anger. "You knew," she said. "We had a threat indicator, unverified, 22 hours ago. And you did not pull Mercer. Moving a high-value patient on an unverified indicator creates its own exposure. It announces that we have the intelligence. It burns the source. It also keeps him alive," she said. The words were flat, not raised, not performed, just flat in the way that facts delivered by people who had seen the alternative were always flat. Reyes held her gaze. He did not flinch, and he did not apologize, and she had not expected either. This was the world she had come from, the world where the arithmetic of operational security ran parallel to the arithmetic of human survival, and the two equations did not always share a solution. She knew that world. She had left it for exactly this reason. "What do you need from me now?" she said. "A conversation," Reyes said. "Not here." The conversation happened in the hospital administrator's conference room on the 2nd floor, because Daniel Holt had been escorted firmly and wordlessly to a waiting area by a woman in a dark jacket who had shown him a credential he did not recognize and who had not smiled when he began to object. Tessa sat across from Reyes and a second DIA officer whose name she was not given. On the table between them was a folder. Reyes placed his hand on it but did not open it. "I am going to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to understand that what I'm about to say has been classified at a level that does not appear on standard clearance documentation." She waited. "The device today was not the first," he said. She felt it. The specific quality of a statement that reorganized everything that had come before it. "In the past 90 days, Reyes continued, "there have been 4 incidents targeting active and recently separated special operations personnel in non-military settings: a gym in Fayetteville, a clinic in Virginia Beach, a private residence in Coronado, and now here." He paused. "The first 3 were not identified as connected until the 3rd incident. By then, 1 individual was dead, 2 were injured." She looked at the folder. "The pattern is specific," the second officer said. His first words of the meeting, quiet voice, precise. "The targets are not random. They are individuals with operational history in a specific theater during a specific window. 14 months, 2019 to 2020. Eastern Syria. Deir ez-Zor province." The room went very still, not because of external noise. Because something inside Tessa Brand went absolutely silent in the way that only happened when the world said a name, or a place or a time, that she had spent 4 years burying under 3 years of night shifts and quiet hallways, and a name that was not her original name, and a life that had been constructed with the specific intention of not being found. Deir ez-Zor. 2019. She looked at the table. Her hands were in her lap. She was aware of them with the particular hyper-clarity of someone whose body was responding to information before the mind had finished processing it. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs, felt the fabric of her scrubs, counted the pressure points, grounded. "Staff Sergeant Brand," Reyes said carefully. "We know about Operation Sandglass." There it was. She had not heard that name spoken aloud since the debrief. The classified debrief in a building without windows, with a recorder, she was told, did not exist. Operation Sandglass, 14 months, Eastern Syria. A mission that officially had never happened, staffed by personnel who officially had never been there, producing outcomes that had never been formally acknowledged by any branch of any government on any document that existed in any accessible archive. She had been there, not as a nurse. As the EOD specialist attached to a joint task force that included SEAL elements, Delta operators, and a CIA forward team, running render-safe operations on IED networks that were supplying material to 3 separate insurgent factions simultaneously. She had rendered safe 21 devices in 14 months. She had done it correctly on 20 of them. On the 21st, a device in a field hospital in Deir ez-Zor, a device she had reviewed every single night for 4 years in the specific way that mistakes made in the dark come back in the dark. A secondary trigger she had not identified had activated. 4 people in the blast radius. 3 had survived. 1 had not. His name was Sergeant First Class Daniel Ortega. He had been 31 years old. He had had a daughter whose name she knew because she had read his file twice before the mission and remembered everything she read. And the daughter's name was Elena. And Elena had been 4 years old when her father died in a blast that Tessa Brand had failed to prevent. She had submitted her separation papers 8 days after the debrief. She had become a nurse because it was the only profession she could think of that kept her close enough to the work, to the saving, to the preventing, without putting anyone in the specific danger that came with having her near a device again. She had been wrong about that, apparently. "The individuals being targeted," she said. Her voice was even. She made sure of it. "They were all present during Sandglass." "Yes," Reyes said. "And Mercer. Mercer ran the SEAL element attached to your EOD team for the final 6 months of the operation." She looked at the folder. "Who else is on the list?" she said. Reyes opened the folder. He turned it to face her. She looked at the names. 7 of them. She knew 4 personally. The 5th was someone she had heard of. The 6th she had to read twice. The 7th was her own. Her name. Her original name. Not Tessa Brand. The name she had been given at birth. The name on her original service record. The name she had legally changed 27 months ago with the specific intention of making herself unfindable. Someone had found her anyway. Someone had found her and had placed her name on this list and had sent a man with a real badge and an assembled device to a floor where she had spent 3 years being invisible. She looked at Reyes. "How long have I been on the list?" she said. "We believe you were identified approximately 6 weeks ago," he said, "and you did not warn me." "We did not know you were here," he said. "The legal name change was thorough. You were not in any database we were monitoring for protection purposes. We did not connect your current identity to your service record until the device was called in this morning and the frequency you used came back to your original clearance file." She looked at the window, at the ordinary Tuesday morning outside it, at the parking structure and the tree line and the pale March sky above Richmond that looked exactly as it always looked and had no awareness whatsoever of what had nearly happened 40 feet above it. "So," she said quietly, "they came here for Mercer, and they found me." "Yes," Reyes said. 2 for 1, she said. He did not answer. She looked back at the folder, at her name, at the 6 other names beside it, at the specific arithmetic of a past she had tried to bury in a building with no windows and 3 years of quiet hallways. "What happens now?" she said. Reyes leaned forward. "That," he said, "depends entirely on you." "What happens now depends entirely on you." Tessa looked at Reyes for a long moment. Then she stood up. Not dramatically, not with anger. The way she stood up from every chair on every shift. Deliberate, economical, no motion wasted. "I need 20 minutes, she said. Reyes blinked. "We are in the middle of..." "20 minutes, she said again. "Then I will give you an answer." She walked out of the conference room before he could respond. Room 14 was quieter than she had left it. The PA system had gone silent. The code gray had been stood down with the same neutral efficiency it had been called. The floor was returning to itself, carts moving, monitors beeping, The ordinary machinery of a trauma center, reconstituting around the morning's interruption, the way water closes around a stone. Mercer was exactly where she had left him. Rex was beside him. She closed the door. She did not sit. She stood at the foot of his bed the way she had stood that morning, when the morning had been something else entirely, and she looked at him and said, "You knew." He held her gaze. "Not about the device," he said. "Not the specifics. I knew there was elevated threat. I was briefed before transfer. And you came anyway." "I come anyway," he said. "That is not new information for either of us." She looked at the window. "Sandglass," she said. The word landed in the room the way it had landed in the conference room. With weight, with history, with the specific gravity of something that had never been meant to be spoken in ordinary spaces. Mercer's jaw tightened. "How much did they tell you?" he said. "Enough." She turned back to him. "You were there for the final 6 months. You ran the SEAL element attached to my team." "Yes." "Then you know about the 21st device." "Yes." "And Ortega." Something moved through Mercer's face. Not pity, not the careful softness that civilians used when death came up in conversation. Something older. The recognition of one person who had carried a specific weight, acknowledging another person carrying the same weight in a different configuration. "I know about Ortega," he said quietly. She nodded once. She moved to the chair beside his bed and sat. Not close. Not the posture of comfort-seeking. The posture of a person who had decided to stop standing because the next part of the conversation required stillness. "Reyes wants me back," she said. "Not as EOD, as something adjacent. He called it a protective intelligence role. He has 7 names on a list, and he wants someone who knows the operational history of Sandglass from the inside to help them identify who is working down that list and why." "And what did you say?" "I said I needed 20 minutes. Mercer looked at her steadily. "What do you actually want?" he said. The question was so direct and so unadorned that it sat in the room without interference. No agenda behind it, no recruitment pitch, no institutional pressure dressed as concern. Just the question, asked by someone who had asked it of himself enough times to know how to ask it of someone else. She thought about it honestly. She thought about Daniel Ortega and Elena, who had been 4 years old. She thought about 21 devices and 20 correct renders, and the one that had not been correct, and the 8 days between that debrief and the separation papers. She thought about 3 years of quiet hallways and fluorescent lights that buzzed slightly wrong, and a name that was not her original name, and the loneliness of a life built to be unfindable. She thought about this morning, about Rex alerting, about the way her body had known before her mind caught up, about the frequency she still remembered, about the fact that when the moment arrived, she had not frozen. She had not failed. She had been exactly what the situation required, and the 3 years of pressing a civilian life over the top of it had not changed what was underneath. She looked at Mercer. "I want Ortega's daughter to grow up in a world where the people who did this to her father are not still doing it to someone else's father," she said. The room was quiet. Rex made a low sound, not an alert, something else. "Then you know what your answer is," Mercer said. "Knowing the answer and giving it are different things," she said. "If I go back, this floor loses a nurse. These patients lose someone who knows their charts, their histories, their fears. That is not nothing." "No," he said. "It is not nothing." "And if I stay," she said, "there are 6 other names on that list, and whoever is working down it already knows where I am." Mercer said nothing. She already knew he agreed. She already knew that he understood the arithmetic exactly as she had laid it out, because he had done the same arithmetic himself, in the same kind of rooms, and had always arrived at the same kind of answer. The door opened. Reyes. He looked at Tessa, then at Mercer, then back at Tessa. "I need an answer," he said. Not unkind, just the way things were. Tessa looked at Reyes. Then she looked at Mercer. Mercer looked at her with the expression of a man who had nothing left to say because the person in front of him already knew everything she needed to know, and the only remaining question was whether she was willing to accept it. She stood up. She straightened her ID badge. She reached into the pocket of her scrubs and removed the folded sheet of hospital letterhead. Daniel Holt's order, delivered that morning by an assistant who had no idea what morning it would turn out to be. She set it on Mercer's bedside table. "Tell Holt the dog stays," she said. Then she looked at Reyes and stopped, because standing in the doorway behind Reyes was a face she recognized, not from this floor, not from this hospital, from a staging area outside Deir Ez-Zor, from a classified debrief in a building without windows, from a photograph in a folder she had seen 14 minutes ago, beside 6 other names, beside her own. The face of someone who was supposed to be under protective surveillance in a safe house in Quantico. The face of someone who was supposed to be unreachable. The face of the one person from Operation Sandglass who had always made her instincts fire wrong, who had always presented as ally but moved like something else, thought like something else, disappeared between missions with explanations that had always been just credible enough to accept and just thin enough to remember. She looked at Reyes. Reyes did not see it. He was looking at her. He was waiting for her answer. She looked at the face in the doorway. The face looked back at her and smiled. The face in the doorway belonged to Marcus Webb, DIA analyst, Sandglass liaison, the man who had coordinated intelligence between her EOD team and the Joint Task Force for 14 months in eastern Syria, the man who had provided the device assessment that led her to the 21st render safe, the assessment that had been wrong. She had believed it was an error, a bad source, corrupted field intelligence. She had blamed herself for not catching it independently, for trusting the analysis over her own read of the physical evidence, for the 11 seconds of hesitation that had cost Daniel Ortega everything. She looked at Webb's smile and understood, in the specific way that trained people understand things, not with drama, not with the slow unfolding of revelation, but with the cold, immediate clarity of a pattern completing, that the assessment had not been an error. It had been deliberate. Webb had given her wrong intelligence on the 21st device. Webb had known there was a secondary trigger. Webb had known Ortega would be in the blast radius. She looked at Reyes. "The individual in custody," she said. Her voice was absolutely level. "The one from the corridor. Has he been interviewed yet?" Reyes frowned at the shift. "He is being processed. Interview him now," she said. "Ask him who gave him the hospital badge contact. The staff member who was coerced. Ask him who made the introduction." Reyes stared at her. "Tessa, ask him," she said. "Right now, before anything else. That answer is the most important thing in this building." Reyes looked at her for one long second. Then he pulled out his radio and stepped into the corridor, angling away from the door, away from Webb. Webb's smile did not change. He stepped into the room. He closed the door behind him. Rex rose from the floor. Every hair on the dog's back lifted simultaneously. The sound that came from him was not a bark. It was lower, older. The sound of an animal that had been in enough rooms with enough wrong people to know exactly what wrong felt like when it walked through a door. "Easy," Webb said, to the dog, pleasantly, as if they were in a hallway at Langley. "I just want to talk." "Rex," Mercer said. One word. The dog held. Webb looked at Tessa. "You always were the fastest one in the room," he said. "Do not," she said. "I am not here to hurt you." He tilted his head. "I am here because the people I work for want to know exactly what Reyes has told you. What is in that folder? How far the investigation has come." A pause. "You were not supposed to be here." That was a genuine surprise. "You were very difficult to find." "But you found me," she said. "The frequency you used this morning," he said. "When you called in the device, we were monitoring that frequency, not for you specifically, for any Sandglass survivor who might still be using legacy communication protocols." He looked almost appreciative. You called it in yourself. That is either very brave or very unfortunate. Ortega, she said. His expression did not shift. Ortega was a necessary outcome, he said. He had discovered something about the operation that could not be contained through standard channels. The device was the cleanest solution available. She had known it was coming. She had known from the moment she completed the pattern. And still, hearing it said aloud in the voice of a man who had eaten meals with Ortega, who had shaken his hand, who had known about Elena and never once. He had a 4-year-old daughter, she said. I know, Webb said. You used me to do it, she said. You gave me wrong intelligence, knowing I would follow protocol, knowing I would trust your assessment, knowing that when it went wrong I would blame myself and leave. You were never supposed to be harmed, he said. The secondary trigger had a directional bias. It was calibrated for a specific radius. You were positioned correctly for survival. How thoughtful, she said. He looked at her steadily. I need the folder, Tessa, and I need to know how much Reyes has reconstructed. After that, you go back to whatever quiet life you have built here, and this ends. You are going to let me walk away, she said. Yes. The way you let the others walk away, she said. The ones in Fayetteville, Virginia Beach, Coronado. Something finally moved in his face. Not guilt, not even discomfort. Just the fractional recalibration of a man who had been discovered more completely than he had anticipated. Those were different circumstances, he said. They were the same circumstances, she said. They found out. Just like Ortega found out. Just like I am finding out right now, standing in this room, listening to you explain the arithmetic of which lives are necessary outcomes and which ones get to continue. She took one step toward him. He was between her and the door. She was aware of that. She was also aware of the IV pole, the blood pressure monitor, the chair, the distance to the door handle, the position of Mercer's bed relative to the window. She had been aware of all of it since the moment Webb walked in because she had not stopped running geometry since 7:14 that morning. You are not going to do anything, Webb said. You are a nurse. You have spent 3 years becoming a nurse. You left all of this behind. I did, she said. She took another step. And then someone planted a device 40 feet from a man who cannot walk, she said. On a floor with 11 patients, 3 of them critical, 2 of them children. Her voice did not rise. It never rose. That was the thing about the voice she had built over 7 years of render-safe work. It went in the opposite direction from what people expected. It got quieter as the stakes got higher. It got quieter as her hands got steadier. It got quieter the closer she moved toward the thing that needed to be stopped. The children are on the east corridor, she said. 43 feet from that panel. Do you know what TATP derivative does to a body at 43 feet? Webb's hand moved toward his jacket. Mercer said, Rex. The dog crossed the room in 1 second. Not at Webb. At his right arm. The grip was precise and it was total, and Webb went absolutely still the way people went still when an animal with the bite force of a military working dog had their primary arm in its mouth and was waiting for a command that had not come yet. Tessa reached him in the same second. She did not reach for the weapon. She reached for his phone, his credentials. The secondary device she had clocked on his belt when he walked in because she had been trained to clock exactly that on every person who entered a room with a posture like his. She stepped back. She looked at what was on the phone. Contacts, encrypted. But the last outgoing message was not encrypted because it had been sent in haste and Webb had not yet engaged the secondary encryption protocol. The message read, Asset identified, folder status unknown, may require extraction. The recipient number had a country code she recognized immediately, not domestic. Foreign intelligence. Active adversarial foreign intelligence. She looked at Mercer. He was already on his radio. Reyes came through the door 40 seconds later with 2 additional agents. The room became something precise and procedural. Webb was removed. Rex released on command. Tessa stood at the window and held the phone and looked at the pale March sky above Richmond and thought about a drainage culvert in Ramadi and a field hospital in Deir ez-Zor and a name she had changed and a floor she had cleaned gurneys on for 3 years in a building where the fluorescent lights buzzed slightly wrong and nobody knew who she was. She heard Reyes on the radio behind her. She heard Mercer's voice, low and steady, coordinating something with someone on a channel she did not have access to. She heard the ordinary sounds of the floor resuming outside the door. She turned around. Reyes was looking at her. "The last message on the phone," she said. She held it out. Country code. Eastern European Active Intelligence. Webb was not working for a domestic interest. This goes further than Sandglass. Reyes took the phone. He looked at it. Then he looked at her for a long moment. "Tessa Brand," he said quietly, "or whatever your name actually is." "My name," she said, "is Tessa Brand. I chose it. It is mine." He nodded slowly. "The folder," he said. "The 7 names. We need to move fast. The other 6 individuals need immediate protective relocation, and we need someone who knows the Sandglass operational architecture from the inside. Someone who can reconstruct the intelligence chain and identify every point where Webb could have inserted corrupted data." "I know," she said. "That person needs to come with me," he said. She looked at Mercer. He was watching her with the same expression he had used all morning, that steady, quiet attention. But something in it had changed. Something had been added that had not been there before. Not admiration, not gratitude. Something quieter than both. The recognition of one person who had been carrying something alone for a very long time, by another who understood exactly how heavy that weight became without anyone who knew what it actually was. "Ortega's daughter," she said. "Elena." Reyes frowned. "What about her?" "When this is done," she said. "When the list is closed and the chain is reconstructed and whoever is above Webb has been identified, I want someone to tell her. Not the classified version, not the official version." She paused. "The true one. That her father found something that mattered, that he tried to stop it, that it cost him everything and it was not nothing." Reyes held her gaze. "I will make that happen," he said. She believed him. She did not know why, entirely. She had believed assessments before that turned out to be wrong. She had trusted sources that turned out to be Webb. But Reyes had the particular quality of a man who said fewer things than he could have said, and meant the ones he said completely. She turned to Mercer one last time. He reached beside his bed and picked up the folded hospital letterhead. He held it out to her. "In case you need it," he said. She looked at it. "Holt's removal order," she said. "Consider it a souvenir," he said. She took it. She folded it once more and put it in her pocket. Then she looked at Rex. The dog was sitting at Mercer's side, composed, patient, watching her with the dark, intelligent eyes of an animal that had assessed her correctly from the very first second of the very first morning and had never revised that assessment once. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she walked out of room 14 for the last time, down the corridor that smelled like antiseptic and old coffee, past the ventilation panel with its 6 Phillips head screws, past the nurse's station where the tech looked up and started to say something, and then simply watched her go with an expression that would take days to fully process, past the fluorescent lights that buzzed their low wrong buzz. She passed the second-floor landing window on her way to the stairwell. Through the glass she could see the small administrative waiting area below, the one where Holt had been escorted that morning. He was still there, sitting in a chair too low for a man accustomed to the 14th floor. His hospital credential had been collected and sealed in an evidence bag. His personal items from the administrator's office sat in a cardboard box on the floor beside him. 3 agents stood at the entrance, not speaking to him, simply present in the way that made any further movement irrelevant. He looked up as she passed the window. She did not stop, did not slow, did not give him the satisfaction of an expression. She simply walked past, quietly, efficiently, without any motion wasted. the way she had walked past him for 3 years. The difference was that this time, he was the one who was invisible. Past 3 years of quiet mornings and unremarkable paperwork and a name that was not her original name, and a life that had been built to disappear. At the stairwell door she stopped. She put her hand on the push bar. She thought about Daniel Ortega, about Elena, who was 8 years old now, who had grown up 4 years without a father, who deserved to know that the word nothing did not apply to him, had never applied to him, and never would. She pushed the door open. She did not look back. Some doors you walk through once, and the person who walks out the other side is not lesser than the one who went in. She is simply, finally, completely herself. The end. If this story moved something in you, if Tessa's courage, her silence, her sacrifice stayed with you, drop a like right now. She carried this alone for 4 years. The least we can do is make some noise for her. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from today. I want to know every corner of the world this story reached. And if you are new here, hit subscribe and welcome home to Secrets of Silent Badges, where the quiet ones carry the stories the world was never supposed to hear. See you in the next one.